Cool. Right. Uh, First off, I apologize for the lighting and everything. This is normally just where I sit to write things, and I was writing for Nerdarchy, and I saw something pop up on my Facebook newsfeed because I was procrastinating, as I often do. But I saw a video from a gentleman called Tim Sherman, and I had that on, had the audio playing while I was finishing writing things, so I didn't feel quite like I was procrastinating as much. And it was a very good video. I didn't enjoy listening to it because very good things don't often have that flat "I enjoyed that" fun feeling, but more it was good to listen to. It's like a global warming documentary that doesn't end on a "but we're all going to be fine." It just quite flatly lays everything out for you, and it's that sort of feeling of like, yeah, I feel better for having watched that. I feel more informed and that sort of thing. So anyway, to get to the crux of the matter, Tim Sherman was having a little rant for about 10 minutes. I've linked the original video down below. Do go and watch it and listen to the guy, see what he's got to say. But it's something that in my games I've rarely encountered, but I've found other bits around about it. So I feel like I can add to this a little bit. And I hope that I can do so in a constructive way. So I'm quickly going to bash this out. But Tim Sherman's talking about racism in games, not elves versus dwarfs, Tolkienian racism. That's fine as a thing to explore. And there's a reason to explore things like that. But with Tim, he was talking about if in a game, even in character, if you're going to be throwing about racial slurs that are connected to real world feelings, that's not something to insist upon. And it's bad if you do insist upon it to the discomfort of others around you. If everyone is completely comfortable, if you are just a bunch of people who don't have any emotional resonance to these slurs, and you discuss it beforehand and say, right, the use of this will be rife to immerse you, and everyone's fine with that, there's going to be some backlash from any observers. But if this is a private game, you do your thing. I wouldn't be comfortable with it, but this is a hypothetical. Everyone is comfortable, so go ahead, you do that. One of the reasons why I think that Tim's got a very good point is I come across softer versions of this. Basically, the main thing that Tim's got an issue with is the fact that this alienates people. What I got the feeling from Tim's video, he may have had a different thing. He did admit that he'd be rambling and going in loops and stuff, and that it wouldn't be a cohesive video, much like this one, because I wanted to just quickly bash this one out. Yeah, so the idea of the N-word being dropped during a game, if people are uncomfortable with that, then they have every right to be uncomfortable with that. This is going to come across badly. I'm feeling it already, but in games where people don't have a lot of background knowledge of things, so like in World of Darkness games, as Tim alluded to, but I'm also playing in a Star Trek game as well just now. And if people don't have a lot of background knowledge, I won't, in the dialogue, go on about, oh, well, you're going to go and deal with the plasma conduits. You've got some warp field dynamics to go and deal with. You know, I'm not going to use the internal language if the people are not comfortable with it, if it's not going to mean a good thing for them. Yes, it can be great to have a game all about a bunch of engineers, and this bunch of engineers using engineering terms and understanding how different elements interact. But in a role-playing game, you can quite easily abstract that. So I can quite easily say the NPC you are talking to rattles off a whole bunch of engineering lingo that your character understands, and you recognize that this person is an expert in their field. That's an abstraction that is perfectly acceptable. If you want in your game to demonstrate that someone is insensitive, and racially so, You don't need to be saying racially insensitive things. You can simply say, this NPC reels off a bunch of slurs, inputting them into his dialogue. The people around him give him strange looks. You can tell that not everyone's quite on board with this. Or you could go the other way and say that everyone's just kind of nodding in approval. No one seems to be bothered by this. This informs the player characters that the environment that they are in is one where that is an acceptable thing, and they get to make the decision of whether or not they want to stay there or not. So a gaming group insisting on using the N-word or any other slur imaginable is unconscionable to me. As a gamer, I cannot conceive of a situation where that would be necessary at all, even to enhance the enjoyment of a game. If someone else is feeling uncomfortable, then you do not do that. So the same thing applies to the engineering example as it does to the racism example. If you've got PCs that would interact with something, but they are not comfortable with the details of it, abstract the details. That's the gist of what I wanted to say on the matter. I'm coming out in support of Tim Sherman's comments, such as I understood them. There are likely to be problems in gaming communities that I just don't see on a regular basis. It may be because a lot of my games and gaming groups are with friends or people that I've got to know, and so I've not encountered this before, but I know of people that have been in these sorts of situations. So if you watch Tim's video and your first instinct of, I can't think of a reason why you would drop the N-word into a game, good. Go and give his video a like. Go and just show your support for him. Just go, yeah, sorry you're going through something like that, something that would curtail your enjoyment of the medium. Because that's what this is. This is a medium of communication, a medium of media consumption. We are creating works of art for some of us, and just trashy novellas for others. Most of my games, I feel, would fall into that latter category. But regardless, we're doing things that other people are observing, including the players. While the games master is doing his thing, the players are observing and absorbing everything. It's up to you how to present that. You can quite easily abstract things and say, this person is interspersing his dialogue with slurs. You may find that pleasant or unpleasant, but regardless, that's what he's doing. And that is enough. Even if as a games master or a player, you want your character to be saying or doing something that you don't know an awful lot about, you can do so. There are very few people that I know that have lived the life of a dragonborn and a vagabond warrior, and yet they seem to be fine talking about these things. So using imagination is sort of a prerequisite. Using your imagination to try and work out how to talk about things that you don't know about, that's part and parcel of the game. So using that same imagination to talk around a thing that's not really suitable. It's the same thing if you were going to intersperse certain kinds of violence into your games. A lot of people get uncomfortable when sex is brought in. And when you mix sex with sexual violence, then that can be very uncomfortable. Now, you can go deep into that if the people at the table are comfortable, but if they're not, abstract that. You can still have it be part and parcel of it without going into the detail. Think of it like television programs is the easiest touchstone that I find. You will have things like Game of Thrones that will graphically show the scenes involved. That will show someone being attacked. And you will watch something else like Law and Order SVU. They deal with the same things. Like that stuff happens a lot. But they talk to the victims. You get the emotion after the fact. You can even skim over the details, and the focus of that story is on finding the bad guy and bringing him to justice, not observing this horrible event take place. So I'm not saying remove all problematic elements from your games. Explore those. That's the great thing about role-playing games, is you get to explore these things. If you want to sit down with the people at your table and go, right, we want to explore what it means to be a human being. We're going to explore several elements of psyche. We're going to bring in a whole bunch of different philosophical conventions. We're going to explore the hell out of this. Then you can do that. If you want to do the same thing to exploring sexual assault and how victims can deal with things after the fact, then you can do that. If you want to just simply have that as a tangential story element, if you want to just have something that you know will have some emotional resonance to a certain degree, but that you can largely ignore and get to the nitty-gritty of what the adventure is supposed to be about, you can do that too. There are so many different ways to handle things. It's difficult for me to get my head around why you would be a stick in the mud and just be like, no, I'm going to go into detail about this horrible thing. As an addendum, I'm wrapping up now. The idea of Dungeons and Dragons specifically being set in a medieval setting and suggesting that that excuses things like racism. Yes, racism was a concept that was fairly heavily abounds in medieval Europe. It was primarily political. You had English people hating on the French, coming up with slurs and rumors and all that kind of stuff. If just by having different colored skin, that wasn't quite the same thing. Like, you would not have English people trading with the French at all, or you'd be ostracized. At certain, like, so there were some times where we would, and sometimes when we wouldn't. But you'd have people sailing all the way to China and dealing with the Chinese. So the idea of racism, the point I'm trying to make is that racism isn't like a ubiquitous thing with ancient man. Your medieval fantasy world doesn't have to have racism just by being in that time setting. It can be different. It could be that there's just political discord, and that you could have a very well-educated populace where everyone understands that that's the case. In my view, if you've got a library in anything smaller than a major city, if you've got magic potions being made available commonly on street markets, you have a civilization that is far more educated than anything that the West had to offer until 100, 150 years ago. Which means that this well-educated society could understand that all of their discord, all of their conflicts are political, and they will ignore race entirely. So they will understand that, yes, the dwarven city over there is made of dwarves, but the problem we have with them is the king. The king is the one making all these policies that are hindering trade in our farmlands, and that's causing some agitation, and that's just built up, and people are just now casually hating on the dwarves. But they understand what it is. They won't just see a dwarf come into the city and attack them. They'll establish that it's a dwarf from this city first. You know, there is no reason to have that kind of bigotry rife in your games, where it is racial, where it is the way we are generally taught that things are. So, well done, Tim Sherman, for making your quick impromptu video. I had a quick look at your YouTube channel. This isn't the sort of thing that you do often, but I encourage you to, you know, do this sort of thing in the future. If you've got something you want to say about gaming, you know, just say something about gaming. Yeah, and especially with you having a strong interest in World of Darkness, I would very much like to speak to you about that. It's a gaming system that I'm starting to get into. Dungeons and Dragons has been my primary bread and butter for nearly 20 years now. So World of Darkness, I'm dipping my toes in, and I've already been burned by Vampire the Requiem, and I've been directed towards Vampire the Masquerade, which already is looking like a slightly better system. But anyway, a video for another time. But yes, thank you, Tim, for prompting this. And yeah, just don't be racist, guys. That's the long and short of it. Bye.